Pressed. Okay. All right, so welcome back to the Open Peace Podcast. I am Jared, and we are joined today by the very special guest, Corey Gil-Shuster of the Ask Project, a man whose videos I've been watching for a very, very long time. Corey, I'm a huge fan. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sure, happy to be here. Thanks.
All right. Now, I have so many questions, like, where did you get your balls of steel for some of the places I've seen you go into? Because, I mean, like, also, how do you get permission to get into those areas as well?
Who asked for permission? How long have you lived here?
No, I mean, I've lived here for about 4 years now, but I mean...
Yeah, you don't ask for permission. You do. Then when you get into trouble, you go, oh, I didn't know. No, you just go. You just go to these places. Now, I don't know if I can recommend people who are listening just walk into the West Bank, and I would take it slowly, find somebody, maybe who's Palestinian or a Jewish settler who will take you around first, because there are a couple of flashpoints where you should avoid. But so I'm not saying, oh, everyone just go, but really it's not a big deal. It really isn't.
All right.
All right.
Sorry about that, guys. My internet disappeared for a second, but I'm ready now.
Yeah. Oh,
all right.
We're such amateurs, but it's fine.
It's the tech.
Also, I mean, like, Corey, like, you run around in places where you don't speak Arabic, and they don't necessarily all speak Hebrew, and maybe English isn't that great. So, like, you're constantly joined with a Palestinian translator, I assume she's Palestinian?
Yeah.
Yes. And it's the same one that you've had for how long?
Not always. She obviously is a fantastic translator. Sometimes, well, at the beginning, I just asked friends to come with me who are Palestinian, and then I realized translation is really hard. Simultaneous translation is difficult. So you realize that they were leaving things out, or they weren't translating it precisely. And so then I realized, okay, I've got to pay a translator to do this. And then there are questions which in Palestinian society are very taboo. They might not be the questions you even think they are, but there's a lot of questions which are very taboo. And so I don't want to get anyone in trouble. So I have other people who are much more anonymous who translate the more taboo questions. And just an example, if I ask the question, and I've asked it, what do you think of the Palestinian Authority? That's actually one of the more taboo questions for them.
For sure.
Yeah.
You can get, Palestinians can get in trouble for translating, for answering, for it's not a democracy there. So
not at all. Well, I know that in the Gaza Strip there was a Palestinian podcaster who did a podcast with an Israeli guy. And they actually chucked him in jail for he was in there for 9 months.
The benefit of being a Canadian in Israel is I don't have any of the taboos that a Jewish Israeli or a Palestinian Muslim would have. And in Israel, you can kind of do what you want. I mean, there are things which are not technically illegal. There are things which you're not supposed to do. But you can usually either talk your way out, or worse comes to worse, I get charged. I could get charged. I could be charged, meaning money, for being in the West. Meaning I get a ticket saying you're not allowed to be here. It's illegal. I take that risk all the time. It hasn't happened. It's happened to friends of mine who are Jewish Israelis who got tickets for being in Bethlehem without a permit.
Yeah, because I was wondering how many close calls have you had?
None, really. No, I mean, well, it depends how you define close calls. A few times at checkpoints coming from the West Bank into Israel. By the way, there's no real checkpoint if you're coming from Israel into the West Bank. Nobody cares who you are. But going back into Israel, proper, through a checkpoint, I go through the Palestinian checkpoint. I sometimes go through the settler checkpoints, but I generally go through, because I don't have a car, so I have to go through, take a bus. So I take a Palestinian bus. I'm lucky. My name is Corwin. My full name is Corwin. So it's Kuf Vav Resh Yud, Vav, Vav, Nun. Anyways, it looks like Karim. I don't know what they're doing, but Israeli soldiers just kind of look at my ID and go, whatever. They don't know what I am. They have no idea. 3 times in 8 years that they looked at my ID and went, Rega, ata Yehudi, you're a Jew. And I went, yeah. And they went, Molani. Leftist, which is Israel.
The whole world.
Okay, sure, I'll take it. Why not? And they here, and I say, yeah, I know, and that's it.
Hey guys, Boot here. I just wanted to point out that the electricity went off for me, and I lost half of my sound recording. And here I just mentioned to Corey that my name in the ID is Abdallah Cohen. So I kind of go through what he goes through sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. They,
Poor
I would think for you, they would say, come on, you're putting me on. Come on.
Look,
even of the Abdallah Cohens who were Jews, not Samaritans, of Jews have gone. That was 80 years ago. There were Abdallah Cohens 80 years ago.
Yeah.
So a young person, they would probably think, come on. This isn't
right. like what's going on? Oh.
So, no, I've never had any close calls. I've had a couple of Palestinians who were very suspicious of me. I've had a lot of Israelis yell at me. Oh, yeah, that's common, but I don't take it very seriously. Israeli Jews who call me a traitorous leftist just by asking the question. I didn't even say what I think. Just by asking the questions that I ask, I get yelled at every so often.
Yeah,
but, yeah, that doesn't faze me. I don't care about that.
That's a sign of the times though over here with the protests, with the, you know, with everything that's going on, with the left versus right. And it's very sad to see, like, you know, and I was saying, Corey, I lived here, you know, 10, 12 years ago, and then I moved away for 6 years, and I came back 2 years ago, and the country's shifted, like, majorly the way I see things. And I think what you're doing is so unique with Ask Project because nobody out there is doing anything similar. And, you know, my hat really does go off to you because, you know, you're answering questions, like tough questions, you know, just for example, in the Quran, it says that the Israelites will come back to their land, and you go and ask the Palestinians that kind of question, you know, no news channel, no mainstream media, nobody's doing anything like that. And I just want to commend you on it, really. You know, it's a fantastic project.
Well, the news, that's not their job. The news is to report what's going on. I would hope, I mean, maybe YouTube is the perfect platform for something like this, but there are so many ideas about the other side, whoever that is, you know, if you're Israeli, it's Palestinian, Israeli, whatever, and within our own side, there's so many ideas that float around. My question is always, how true are they? What does that mean? What is the impact of that? That's what I always wonder, because I think this also started for me, the genesis was I'd lived here during pre-Oslo and post-Oslo, and I didn't understand, living on the Israeli side, why Palestinians were bombing Israel when there was a peace process going on at the time. So in the 90s, it felt optimistic. It was a different, at least on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. I visited Bethlehem in 98, I think it was, and there were people speaking to us in Hebrew, and they were very excited to have Israelis. Then at the same time, you have buses blowing up in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. It does, to a person, a Canadian living here, it made no sense. It didn't make sense to Israelis either. But the question is, why is this happening? And nobody, I always found nobody was doing really good analysis of what do the people think. We know what the leaders thought. We know what Arafat had to say. We know what Saab Erekat had to say, or Rabin. But what do the people think? And that always interested me. Why were, on the one hand, buses blowing up, and yet there seems to be this peace process on the Palestinian side? What's going on? So part of this is I don't want to be caught off guard again. So if we have if they announce today there's a new agreement between Israelis and Palestinians, I want to know in my head what are the chances of it moving forward, and what are the potential issues in front of us. That's just my geeky obsession. So that's part of why I do it. And the fact that nobody is doing this, yes.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And I must say, you know, while I was away from Israel, I watched your channel religiously. You know, it kept me involved.
That's
let me know about how everything's going over there. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I had another little question for you, and it's kind of related to Aboud a little bit, because as you know, the Samaritans, they have two IDs, right? They carry a Palestinian ID and also an Israeli ID. And from your, three, sorry, you got the Jordanian as well, right, Aboud? Yeah. So I was wondering if, from your interaction with the Palestinians, do you think that a kind of solution where they had that kind of option and they could tap into a Palestinian entity while also tapping into Israeli economy, coming over and working in Israel, could a solution like that work? Is that something that is feasible if for the West Bank anyway?
This is something you really have to ask Palestinians, but no, I don't think so. The problem is that you're defining the conflict in a very particular way and then coming up with a solution in that because of an outcome of how you're defining it. They don't define it the same way. They define it as this is colonialism. These Jews do not belong here. The Jews are all Americans and Polish people. And the fact that some of you are American it kind of reinforces this. Yeah. But that all the Israelis are people from Poland and America. They came here, whether, there's a whole theory about how Britain sent them, America sent them as, to colonize. But eventually, just like in Algeria and the French were sent back, the Jews will be sent back, period. That's the dominant narrative that's told in the Arab world and for sure for Palestinians. So if you look at it that way, they would look at that, any solution that Israelis come up with as being ridiculous. That makes no sense. How can you even speak to a person who doesn't, your colonizer? How can you negotiate through that? So, I mean, personally, look, knowing what I know as a Canadian, my stand is, if I were Palestinian, I'd accept anything because, if I were Palestinian, I've lost so much. Having a good job, having a normal life, having freedom of movement, having the potential to have, a nice house and a job and a car, which is a lot of them do anyways, as it is, but even having better potential for that would be enough for me. I personally, me, Corey, I don't have a huge need for that identity as a Palestinian and my history. Same as a Jew. I'm a Jew, but I don't have that huge need. So I personally would accept kind of any solution, personally, but I don't think they will. I don't see that happening.
Like at any point, or like, do you think maybe in the future? Because I mean, like, you constantly have your finger on the pulse of what people think. You're out there talking to them all the time. Do you think people in general are suffering?
Anything, of course, is possible, and I think one of the factors in this is, so you wouldn't have thought of Egypt making peace with Israel if this had been 1973. You need a strong leader to tell its people, okay, we're changing the way we think. It doesn't mean the people go with the leader, but you at least need to have that leader to drag them into a new reality. And there is nobody on the Palestinian side like that. There's nobody brave enough on the Palestinian side to say, my people, my Palestinian people, we have lost this. Palestine of 1947 is gone. It will never return. We need to cope. We need to deal with what we have and live our best lives as it is today. We need to figure that out. No Palestinian leader has ever even hinted at it. If anything, they do the opposite. We will have the right of return. We will have Palestine back in some way, whether it's with the Jews, without the Jews. There's different ways of looking at it. No leader has ever done that. So it doesn't mean that the people are going to follow. It just means that's at least what the
yeah.
In this part, I mentioned that many Palestinians did not like the fact that Mahmoud Abbas was against a third intifada.
Yeah. Even he said he personally would give up his right of return for peace. I remember that was years ago. And I
remember hearing about that on the news.
How dare you? And now he was saying, I'm talking about me, just me. And it's hard because the Palestinian street is furious, and they live in a narrative that doesn't allow for there to be compromises at the moment. I'm not saying it can't change, and I'm not saying. And underneath, and there's also, I also have to point out, Abood, you could speak to this better than me, but there is a public, what you tell people, because if you are a Palestinian, I mean, us Jews can relate to this, you feel like you've lost so much. So you feel like you have to speak tough. You have to talk, because if you admit any crack in your identity, your whole identity falls apart. Your whole, who you feel you are as a Palestinian starts to fall apart. As if you take one element, meaning the right of return to what's fought today, if you take that element out, suddenly my whole Palestinian identity is going to disappear. It's not true, by the way, ever, for any people. We as Jews know this because we feel the same thing. If suddenly intermarriage goes up, I'll give an American example. Intermarriage goes up, it's the end of Judaism, the end of the Jewish people. It's never true. It wasn't true 2,000 years ago. It's not true today, in my opinion. Watch all this being wrong.
But just as an example on that, I'm the child of intermarriage.
Exactly. Yeah. People change. People adapt to new realities. That is my hypothesis of
so
life.
Speaking of that, and speaking of new realities, we're seeing a push in the Arab world to peace with Israel, something that we haven't seen in 30, 40 years. We're seeing countries like yesterday, Morocco joined the bandwagon, UAE, Oman could be on the way, potentially the crown jewel, Saudi Arabia, hopefully could be on the way. So are the Palestinians kind of being cornered into a position to say, okay, guys, you have to come and negotiate something here, because the Arab world is kind of saying, okay, guys, you know, we've tried everything against Israel for 70 years and nothing has worked. We have to accept Jews as our cousins in the Middle East. Their religion is 1,500 years older than ours. It predates the Arab conquests of the Middle East. And
now I feel like you're being a bit presumptuous of what they're gonna. But
the hatred is very ingrained in the culture there, and it's all, you know, rooted in tradition. And like you said, actually, Corey, like it's all about perception, and everybody's seeing it through the lens of their own views, and that kind of makes it a perpetual, you know, conflict, because nobody's going to stop that cycle. Do you think
so Israelis are too powerful and have it all. I mean, I feel bad for Palestinians, because on the Israeli side, nobody here gives a shit about the Palestinians. They don't exist. I mean, even, okay, I'll take a total the example of COVID and the vaccines. I have not heard anyone talk about all these vaccines coming into Israel and if they're going to be shared with Palestinians. And if I were Palestinian living in the West Bank, I'd be like, what the hell? Hello, we live here too. I realize it's a different political entity, but we're under your control. Why is nobody talking about this? There actually was somebody in the Ministry of Health who did say months ago that they would be shared with the Palestinians. So I'm hoping. But my point is, on the Israeli side, these Palestinians barely exist. Which the issue with that is, the only way for Palestinians to exist in the Israeli mind is for Palestinians to commit violence. That's the only way they ever get noticed. And we, Israelis, Jews, should not let that happen. This is really dumb a way of managing a conflict. You should be paying attention to the people who you're in conflict with. Went off on a tangent. But the point is that Palestinians know they are not important. They are no longer important on the world stage. And you know, on the one hand, yes, I hope that does pressure them and push them into an agreement. But I'm not sure. I don't know. This is not my expertise on if, you know, let's say Japan in World War II. Yes, they had to be pushed into an agreement. That did work out really, really well. Germany too. Will that work in the Middle East? I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's better to get people that's believing in a particular process that works best for all. But I don't know. I could be wrong.
I mean, there's always potential for that, and that's what we're trying to do here. Like, we started this show on the idea of, if we can show that, like, people from different backgrounds can come together and just talk as human beings. You know, like we can slowly chip away at that. And I remember there was a video you did a while ago. I think it was Kane who sent it to me. It was the one where you asked people, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you know Islam? How much how much do you hate Israel?
Yeah.
And like that video.
I'm redoing the Palestinian one, by the way.
The what?
I'm redoing the Palestinian one now because people got very upset. This is very typical. Because it was phrased by, I didn't have a proper translator at the time. So I had different people translating. And some people translated, how much do you hate Israel? And some people translated, how much do you hate Israelis?
Yeah. And some people say, how much do you hate Jews? And
Jews, exactly. And yes, those are all separate things. However, in the mind of both peoples, when you use the word Jew, Zionist, Israeli, for Palestinians, or for Israelis, Arab, Palestinian, Muslim, it's all the same. They're thinking of the exact same thing. They are not this sort of, it's much more of a Western idea of people in the West thinking, no, they don't mean what you think they mean. No, they do. Because I'm getting the exact same result. I'll cut to the chase. You can hear Palestinians, if they know some Israelis or they know some Jews, they are much less likely to hate. And those who don't know any, have never met any, which is the 98% of Palestinians, they hate. 100% hate.
Mm-hmm. In this part, I mentioned to Corey that the Palestinians do not have hate towards Judaism per se. This hatred might come against Zionism, and that might be a little bit of a different aspect of the conflict.
Sure. Religion's a massive impact in this conflict, but people often conflate the two though as well. Some people seem to think that this is an entirely religious conflict. Some people are totally focused on
But yeah, no, I agree. Look, this is a very complicated conflict. I work for a conflict resolution program, a master's in conflict resolution. Here, let me pitch. Come study a master's in conflict resolution because this conflict is very interesting that it has elements of all different conflicts that I know of, like South Africa or Ireland or Cyprus or Tibet and China, in different ways. That if you could focus on, it's not only about religion, it's not only about identity, it's not only about power, it's about all of these things coming together in these unique ways. And to every single person, if you're a religious Muslim, you're going to think this is a religious conflict. If you are a secular Jew, you're going to say, no, this is about, power, and we have to have power, we have to be able to control things. Everyone's going to see it from a different perspective. So that's why this is actually a very interesting conflict. It has so many elements that get interwoven into, and saying it's about this or it's about that is missing the complexity.
Yeah. Corey, let me ask you real quick. How did you get the idea to start the Ask Project?
Okay, so the story I've told a couple of times is actually, it came to me when I was having a Facebook debate. I think it was Facebook. I don't remember what forum it was, but somebody who is Canadian, a woman who was Canadian, who had lived in the West Bank, had a Palestinian boyfriend, and then spent 5 days in Jaffa and felt she knew who the Israeli Jews were making all these claims about Israeli Jews and how racist they are. Now, she wasn't entirely wrong. It wasn't that she was entirely wrong. It's just she didn't have any context, because what she was basing it on was her discussion with a taxi driver. And as anyone who's been to Israel knows, taxi drivers not exactly known for subtlety, not exactly known for nuance. They just tell you what they think at all times. Well,
everyone's got a story about that.
She said, what are you going to do? Because I argued with her, it was actually during the 2011 protest, the social protest. Yeah, because I lived on Rothschild in front of it. And I was too old to interact with, because everyone there was, 20. But I would walk around and talk to people, and it was just incredible. It was incredible time. It really was. And so her point was Arabs and Palestinians were not welcome. I think that's what she said. We're not welcome there, which was funny because the 10th of 1948 Palestinians was actually like in front of my house to the right. Like I would go see, and it was even vandalized at one point. Lots of drama going on. But the majority, 90%, 95% of the people there, because I would just kind of hang out and observe, were actually defending people they didn't agree with, religious Jews or Palestinians or Arab Israelis. And she said, I don't believe you. What are you going to do? Go out and ask everyone? And when she said that, I thought, well, I have a video camera. Why don't I just go out and ask them questions? Yeah. That just seems like the simplest thing. Why am I wasting my time on a keyboard typing my opinions? And you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have this these illusions of what Israelis are. Why don't I just go ask people? So I put it back on the forum. Okay, guys, I have this idea to go out and ask questions. I'm going to go use the people on Rothschild and whatever in that area and ask some questions. Give me a question. And it was very interesting. All those people, none of them were Israeli, by the way. None of them were Palestinian. They were all foreigners.
Oh, yeah.
Arguing about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which I love. I love how it's like arguing about the rights of the minority of, Finland.
Yeah.
What do I do? Because I read in a book. And I said, give me a question. And nobody wanted to give me a question. They didn't know, they couldn't adapt their argument to a question, which I thought was interesting. And then finally somebody said, the answer is the one-state solution. And I said, great. I'm going to take that and ask that as a question. And already the protest had ended at this point. It was already fall, winter. And so I just went out in the neighborhood and I asked. And when I had about 7, 8 responses, and I put them in iMovie. I'd never used any editing software. I didn't know how to make a film. And I put it in, and when I first watched it, I said, this is powerful. This is good. I don't have to argue with people anymore. I can get the people of Israel to give their own arguments. And of course, there were contradictions in what they said. Some said yes, some said no. Everyone said something different. So, as you know, if you live here. And then it just hit me exactly what to do.
That's so simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here, I believe I asked Corey how many times he has been to Palestinian cities.
I go every 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, he shows up. He can say hi.
I do. To your town, I've only been a couple of times to Samaritan town. My issue is a car. I need to get. I'm renting a car lately, so.
Corey, I'll be happy to take you over to Al Grizim anytime, man. Anytime.
Okay. Done.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm getting the vaccine. I plan to be first in line, and then I'm in everybody's face. I don't,
We'll go and see your booth. And our other partner as well, Lane. It'd be great to see him as well. Be great.
Yeah.
The rule is,
like we have a Palestinian partner, but we think he's a bit worried about having his face and opinion out there. So.
Who's that? Sorry.
We have an extra Palestinian partner, but he's a bit worried about having his face and opinion.
I can blur his face out. I can, if he's really that worried, and because I'll do that. And the other people, I won't. So another rule is I don't. So you guys tell me, oh, you have to speak to Muhammad, let's say, and so okay, I'll interview the one guy, but then the other 7 have to be random people. I'm not a DJ. I don't do requests, and that's it. If I only interview people that people say, no, you have to speak to this person, it gives a skewed view. One person's fine. That's okay, but you need video. But the rest of them have to be on.
Here I remind Corey of a Samaritan woman who he interviewed.
The one from Cologne? Wow, I love her.
She was great. She was great.
Oh, wow.
She was amazing.
I remember her name now. Do you know her?
And yes, I did know her, but I forgot her name.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, I thought you were about to say, she's my aunt.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Here at this point of the video, I just mentioned that as Samaritans, we tend to be a little bit careful with what we say online because we have relations with the Palestinians and the Israelis, and things can be a little bit sensitive when we mention certain topics.
So one of my favorite things. Oh, first of all, I love any opinionated, intelligent, usually woman who will tell it like it is. That is my favorite person in the world. I just want to sit and have coffee with them all day and record. And she was amazing and surprised me because I don't know the Samaritan community and I didn't know how traditional it would be. And I was so happy that in that sense, it's not, she wasn't that traditional, meaning she was very direct and to the point. And she couldn't say everything. I mean, off camera, all she really said, she didn't say anything that different, by the way. All she said is, look, Middle East, they will go, meaning if you go against the Muslims, they will come after you with a vengeance. Like, that's basically all she said. And she said it in other words anyways. But
yeah,
nobody's ever told me something off camera, by the way, that they didn't say on camera. Nobody has ever surprised me that much. Oh, that's not true. There was one guy who is in a video talking about music, who I'll tell this story. This is good. He was talking about how he listens to Arabic music. He's Jewish, Israeli, and he was talking about how much he loves Arabic music and whatever. And then after I put down the camera, we were talking and talking. I don't know how it came up. His sister was killed in a terrorist attack.
wow.
And yeah, and I said, can I ask you about that? And he said, no. And I said, why? He goes, there are things, no, why bring up negative things? Why? And he said he was in Jenin as a soldier, and he has friends in Jenin. So he both fought Palestinians in Jenin, and then 2 weeks later went back and played Sheshbesh with them.
That's amazing.
That is the
You tell that story, and he's like, no, why? Why would, because this is my interpretation. I have no idea if this is what he meant, but I have good relations with Palestinians. Yes, sometimes I have to fight them because they're trying to kill me. But why would why talk about negative things? Let's talk about positive things. That was my interpretation, but I could be wrong. That was actually shockingly different than, but no, I don't think anyone else would.
This is a country of extremes, though. Like, that happens a lot. People do that kind of thing all the time.
And I wish people
think about it.
Jared, can 1 second? I just want to ask something. Do you think that the reason people are usually, almost always, willing to talk to you openly, is that something that you do, or is it just that people are so actually reasonable and they actually are willing to talk? Do they come straight out with it, or?
Well, first of all, wait, just so you know, when I'm asking, I really need to make a video about this. When I walk up to people and say, hi, can I ask you a question for YouTube? About half of them say no. They don't know what they want. But they just, and actually it's funny because they never think the question that I do ask them is what I'm going to ask them. They always think it's something to do with what's going on this minute, and it never is. It doesn't matter. Or they think it's like a trivia thing. They just don't want to be on YouTube. It has nothing to do, and it has nothing to do with their opinions. It's not that they're right-wing and they don't want to be, or left-wing, they don't want to, it has nothing to do with that. Palestinians almost always agree because they think it's so interesting. And nobody ever pays attention to Palestine. That's my interpretation. Nobody pays attention to them, so they don't mind it. Wait, what was your question? I already lost my train of thought.
The question was, is it something that you do specifically that gets them to speak so openly, or are the ones that are already willing to speak, they're just...
I think it's that big Canada energy that just calms people down.
No, I don't think so. I actually, what I think is, first of all, I asked the question and then I just shut up. And I learned this by mistake because I didn't know what else to say. Sometimes I just kind of stare at them and it gets them to talk more. And I don't know. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I speak, you hear me speaking because I have to translate to the viewer, because everybody here speaks in very specific slogans. And they think everyone understands their slogans, and they do not. People outside do not know what they're talking about. In fact, that was my issue with Palestinians. The fact that I had lived in Israel for so long, I knew what Israelis were talking about. So it's biased in that sense, meaning I understood what they're talking about. With Palestinians, so when they would say the occupation, I always assumed they meant the 67 occupation. It took me a couple of years to figure out they're talking about Jaffa and Haifa. They're not talking about Ramallah. So, and it took me years. So that's why I still say, wait, are we talking about the 67 occupation or the 48 occupation? And they go, what's the difference? And my translator constantly says, really? Do we have to ask this again? And I'm like, yes, because people outside do not understand this. They talk about, because when you say occupation, you mean something very specific. And to Palestinian, it means something very different. So,
I was like, this.
In this part, I also mentioned about saying Israel rather than saying 1948, and also saying Palestine rather than saying Israel. In both countries, it might be a problem for some people. That is.
Yeah. And I have another question, tangent a bit back to something you were talking about earlier with the Samaritan woman. Is that because I've noticed that in videos, and you've put this in videos before as like an afterthought, that like Arab women in particular, it's very hard to get them to talk, and when they do talk, their opinions seem, to me at least, to be very Palestinian mainstream, very ideological.
Yeah.
Very hard set. Do you feel like do you feel that like most people are just so intimidated to say anything outside of like what the people who shout the loudest say over there is like such a force that like you can't get an honest opinion, and especially for women because like they're in a particularly vulnerable position?
Maybe. I never thought of it particular to women, but yes, I think there is it more so on the Palestinian side, because the Israeli side, for those who don't know, saying the contrary is always better. It's an Israeli thing. If you are, I remember having this argument about circumcision, for example, and people, you'd bring up, no, circumcision is barbaric, and then they would, the person would be like, how dare you? And then if somebody said, no, you have to circumcise, somebody would say, the same person would say, I've had this conversation, the same person would say, no, it's barbaric. So it's just an Israeli Jewish mentality of anything you say, I have to say the opposite. But on the Palestinian side, there's a different dynamic of what is mainstream acceptable and what is acceptable to your family. It's not so much exactly society; it's more your family. What you're not going to get in trouble with them. So it is safer to cut to the chase. It is safer to sound tough and say, I hate the Israelis, I hate the Jews, Israel has to go away. Then it is the opposite, even if they entertain the idea that, yeah, we have to live with Israel in some way. I don't know for sure if in private they would, they would say, yeah, maybe we do have to deal with Israel. I don't know, hard to know. But I'll give an example. There was a guy that I interviewed, I actually remember interviewing him in Ramallah, who, and the question was, if you saw a Jew, and I specifically said Jew, not Israeli, at the side of a road, would you help him? And I asked the same thing. If you saw an Arab, ask Israelis, would you saw an Arab at the side of the road, would you help him? I tried to make it a kind of neutral and see where it goes. Anyways, he said, yes, I would. Okay. Cut ahead to a couple of years later, a friend of mine from Shrem, from Nablus, tells me, I have a good story for you. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said some bald Canadian guy interviewed him a couple of years ago about whether or not he would help a settler. Okay, in his mind, he heard a settler, but doesn't matter. I actually said Jew, but whatever. He understood. And he told this friend of mine, I said yes. And then the entire night, I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking, what if my father sees me? My father would kill me for that answer. I should have said, I would kill the Jew. That's what I should have said. Yeah. Now, he's telling me this because he's very open to peace, and he's saying about his own people, guys, we have a problem here that we're very, there's a lot of hatred here. So he was trying to show how Palestinians think. And I thought, to me, it's interesting that in Palestinian society or in Arab and Muslim society, it's about what your family thinks more so. And then, then your community and as well. Whereas for Israeli Jews, it's not only about your family has an impact, but it's much more about what all your friends are going to say. It would be just a different way of looking at it. So they're just, and each side has a different culture, and how they interpret, what they're saying goes through that lens of the culture as well. So does it have to do with women specifically because they feel they have to act tough, whereas men don't? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. If you have a good question, I can ask Palestinian women. I'd love to ask it. So, meaning,
the main question I have for Palestinian women is, do you feel safe? Like, that would be my main question. Do you feel safe, in your own culture, in your own cities, in your own family? Do you feel safe in general around your own people? That would be my question.
Well, I doubt that they would say that within their family they don't feel safe, because it would be dangerous to say that, not because they're not going to admit it. That would be my thought. But who knows? I mean, sometimes you find, every so often I find somebody who's super brave where I can tell they're telling me something that is taboo in their society, but they really want it to change. So they are more, they'll say it, but it's rare. It's pretty rare. I don't know. I'd have to find a way to ask it that allows them to feel safe, whether it's off camera, meaning I don't point the camera at them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd be interesting to know.
There's plenty of different ways, but yeah.
So from a Canadian,
are they afraid of violence?
Canadian perspective, one thing I noticed about Palestinian women is they're not allowed to be as free as men in the sense of a woman can't scream across the street, "Hey, let's go do something." It's considered inappropriate, whereas a man absolutely can do that.
Yeah.
Little subtle things. So do you define that as safety, meaning women can't act that way?
Yeah, like I personally,
that's more cultural, that's a more cultural thing, I think.
Yeah.
So it is, but not all of the women that are part of that culture are enjoying it necessarily. It's
absolutely.
Yeah,
because I and it was a Palestinian hijabi woman who told me that. So she was wearing a hijab, and she was saying, "We have different rules that I don't like. That I can't act the same way as a boy." So
yeah.
So
which is an injustice. That should not happen. Like she should be able to walk down the street wearing whatever the hell she wants and be sure that she's going to get home unscathed. Like
exactly, it's the same. If a woman went in a skirt in Bnei Brak, you're going to get.
That's what I was going to say.
And that's how I'm comparing it. I'm trying to compare it to each religion.
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a tricky question for you, Corey. Maybe I don't know how you're going to answer, but I'll go for it anyway. So the kind of stubborn Israeli and stubborn Palestinian mindset of no, we need to kick them out of here. We need to get them out of here. That's the only solution. And on the Israeli side, no, we need to fight them. We need to get rid of them. We need to have the whole of the land to ourselves. We can never have peace with them. There's no solution to it. Though that mindset of people, what kind of things can we do to break down that mindset and to bring it over to a mindset of we can progress, we can move forward, we can come up with a deal?
Well, I think my opinion, only an opinion, everyone else has different opinions, fine. There's two things. First of all, you need leaders to tell you things like that. And unfortunately, we don't have leaders like that on any side. We really don't, which is really
I
bad.
agree.
Sorry?
I said ever since Rabin, there's been nothing.
Yeah, and even he felt like, you could tell he felt like he was being dragged into it as well. So he didn't really stand up and say, I want a different reality. And then coupled with that is you need to see on the other side, and by the other side, I mean both sides. You need to see some very visible hope of what you're working towards. And the problem with media is the media always focuses on negatives, which is, it's our instincts. This is what we want. This is what we look for. We want to be safe. So we look for, you see, they don't really believe what they say they claim they believe. Or look, they're doing all these things. And they're all true. It's not that these things are not true. But we need to see on each side people to be much more vocal about positive things as well. And I'm the last person to be positive. I see the dark in everything, so I'm always like, the end of the world. You have no idea. At the beginning of COVID, I was stocking up I was like one of those crazy people with the toilet paper.
Really? Really? That was
I go into quarantine, 2 weeks of food, and I'll
Bro, let me tell you, you run out of toilet paper, army strategy. Just go out, grab some leaves, grab a stick. It works. I remember having to do that since in the shit talk. I've never needed toilet paper that badly ever again.
The point is that I think what needs to happen, my idea is that there isn't enough marketing in peace. I think you're right. We don't really have a process to even market around. But if there was, if the Oslo Accords came back, and I know that's horrible according to so many people, but let's say there was some process, is you need a good marketing campaign of both sides really speaking out so people have something to latch onto. Because what happens, we watch the news and we hear somebody on the other side say, I want to kill the Jews, or somebody on the Palestinian. Or on the Palestinian side, they hear, aha, you see, there's this rabbi who's teaching we need to enslave the Palestinians or the non-Jews. And people focus on these things and say, aha, this applies to everyone. It never applies to everyone. Neither does the positive, by the way. But if you're going to remember anything, at least remember the positive, because there is in conflict a self-fulfilling prophecy to these things. So if I really believe it's going to fail, I'm just going to give up and not do anything, or even worse, make it, set something in motion to make it fail, whether I'm the person who's the leader or I'm the, one of the people. And we don't see how we do that. But we do. We all do that. So that would be my, thing to throw into the conversation. There's lots of others. I mean, if you study conflict resolution, and there's lots and lots of ideas around this as well. But those to me are the two. You need the grassroots to hear something about the other side, which reinforces your positive views about them, plus a humanization process. Plus, you need leaders to be saying, it's okay to do that. It's okay. You're allowed to do that. So,
yeah. Corey, I wanted to ask you, are there any places that you wouldn't go or haven't been yet? Like specific villages over in the West Bank that you kind of think, ooh, I wouldn't go there?
No. I want to go to Gaza, but that makes me nervous because it's under Hamas. So I'm relatively safe in the West Bank because even if the Palestinian police say, wait a second, you're an Israeli, all they're going to do is take me to like I'm not a soldier. I've never been in the army. I
You never served?
I never served.
Really?
No. Mm-hmm. Yep. I was older and I got out of it. It was quite easy to get out of. So
yeah,
I actually regret a little bit because as somebody who's interested in conflict, I think having that experience of working directly with soldiers would have been interesting. But no, I never served. So, Gaza I would love to go to, but that makes me nervous. If somehow I could get into Gaza, it would make me nervous because I feel like I wouldn't. The safety issue would be a bigger issue there. But in the West Bank, no, there's no problem.
That's good to know. That's great to know.
Sorry?
That's great to know that it's, that's the situation over there. It's fantastic. Really.
Yeah, no, my translator is nervous about going to refugee camps because by Palestinian standards, they're considered tough places, and you're not exactly, they're, lawless in some ways. So I'm always looking for people to go with me and translate. I'm looking at you, Aboud, to ask questions because it doesn't make me. I mean, I don't know if I, bring an Israeli flag and wear a kippah in the middle.
Oh no!
But it's, I think it's okay. Mostly, I hope it's okay.
No, it's totally okay. You can go to Shem, for example. I don't think people. It's definitely a much safer place than many people think. Like Shem, for example, or Nablus, and I think it's precisely because of what you mentioned a little bit earlier. The media is all they get. Like Israelis, I think the media is all they get from Nablus. They don't get the good side of it, and that kind of changes their perspective on it. And I wish that was different.
Look, a couple of times, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes I'm recognized.
I'll be right back. There's something flashing out my window. I'm going to check it out. I'll be right back.
No worries, John.
So a couple of times in the West Bank, I've been recognized, like maybe 3 or 4 total. We're talking out of, probably thousands of people. A couple of times younger people didn't like me, but they appreciated what I did. So that was good. Mm-hmm. And then 2 times, one woman said, I hate what you do, and she walked away, and I tried to film her, like not to catch her, meaning to say, tell me why, and she just didn't want to have anything to do with it. And one guy in a refugee camp in Colombia, I said, he realized why, and he goes, oh, I know who you are. And I said, great, why you don't like me? And he gave me a very good argument. I mean, I don't agree with his argument, but he gave me a very good argument why he doesn't like my videos. And that's legitimate, absolutely legitimate.
Yeah, fair enough.
Palestinians to think in democratic ways, obviously, part of democracy is the ability to criticize in a nonviolent way. So, I'd be a complete hypocrite if I was like, no, how dare you not like my video?
How dare you? My videos are sent by God.
Right?
How do you separate yourself from the ugly things that you hear people saying sometimes?
I
don't think I would keep my...
You have incredible control of your temper.
Well, first of all, on the Palestinian side, I'm always worried someone's going to stab me.
That is a decent motivator.
Part of it is that I'm behind the camera, so that gives you a little bit of distance because you're looking at it through a lens, and it's almost like you're watching it on YouTube in that sense, even though it's live. So it gives you a bit of distance. And I think, well, if I lost it, the people watching this would be like, oh, what an idiot, So that's a little bit. And then also you develop a scab over, like at the beginning, you notice I did a video near the beginning where it's called Corey. Wait, how is it? No.
Finally loses his temper.
Yeah, loses his temper. That was it. And that was after a day in my defense. It was after a day of hearing about how there was no Holocaust, the Jews made it up, but not enough Jews were killed in it. I love the contradictions. Like, no Jews were killed, or 200,000 Jews were killed, but not enough Jews were killed in the Holocaust. And so I was just raw and just, okay. And I just kind of lost it. And which, by the way, I'm working on, it's just been slower, on a video of me losing it on Israelis, because the trigger on the Israeli side is... when they say, I ask the question, they say, are you some kind of leftist traitor?
Oh, I love
that. Just asking them a tough question, to me, I think there's a problem here in democracy. I think there's a huge issue on the Israeli side, more so. Meaning, because it's supposed to be a democracy, and they don't understand what a democracy is. And by asking a question, I'm immediately called a leftist traitor who works for breaking the silence in a second. I get that all the time. So I have a few of me losing it on people, but I'm trying to collect more so I can actually make a full video of it. So there is something.
I have a fun story that you could clip out of our video if you want to add it onto that video about me getting called a leftist traitor and having my right-wing family come to my defense.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because Kane's met my cousin Sivan, who is fairly right-wing, and his grandparents, they're not, I guess they're my grandparents through marriage. It's complicated, but they are hardcore Likudnikim. Like they're high up in there. You want a full tour of the entire Knesset building? They have lunch with Bibi. They can get in. It is like they're high in there. And like we discuss politics a lot. And me and Sivan, we like to go out for walks, and we're in their area, which is kind of like a right-wing neighborhood, and we're discussing things, just switching back and forth between English and Hebrew. And somebody overhears me take up the position that we should be kinder to the Palestinians. We should loosen things up in my debate with Sivan. And this total rando jumps into it and starts going on me. Mm-hmm. Like, why would you say that? Like, what? Like, you leftist scum. You think they're gonna not gonna kill you? They're gonna come over here, and I'm just like, I'm not being that naive. But like, I can't even get a word into this dude. I literally say nothing because like he just wouldn't let me talk. Out of nowhere, verbal smackdown. And like Sivan's grandparents come up, they start pushing the guy back, like telling him and start telling him off for me. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there stunned by everything that just happened. And they don't agree with me at all. But that really shocked me.
You get used to it. I mean, the first time any of these things, or I hear certain things, obviously I don't know if you can tell, but sometimes I don't know where to go with it because it's the first time I've heard it. But after you've heard it a bunch of times, I don't know, it loses its sting. You know how to deal with it better. But sometimes I lose it on people. I lose it all the time. I have a bad temper.
Yeah.
Not good.
Really?
It seems like you control it very well. It seems like
in the videos I'm a little bit better behaved, but I'm constantly calling people barbarians in this country. Constantly.
Oh,
Who is it that comes from,
Yes.
somewhere else, a little more civilized?
I was about to say, everybody thinks everyone else is a barbarian in this country.
Yes, sure.
It's just the way
As I
it
act
works.
barbaric to tell them they're barbarians, yes.
Yeah. I mean, you have to fight fire with fire. Big pointy fire stick. Go, ouch.
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting thing that I'm actually surprised that, not that many other people do what you do, because it is quite a simple idea.
Yeah.
But
A few people approached me from the Arab world. There was a guy in Morocco, a guy in Egypt, and a guy in Iraq who wanted to do the same thing. The guy in Morocco and Egypt wrote me back saying that their family convinced them not to do it because it's too dangerous. The guy in Iraq actually made a video, but he didn't make it public.
I wonder why.
It was very cool. I wish more people would do it. I really do. I actually envisioned this at the beginning as me doing the Israeli side and finding somebody on the Palestinian side to ask Palestinians, because I don't understand Palestinian society, culture, politics. So, and I understand Israelis much better. But every time I would ask somebody who's Palestinian, they would say, "There's no way. They're not doing it. It's too dangerous for them." So.
Yeah.
There is some Palestinian who's doing something a little bit similar to this, but I don't think to the extent of your questions. I think it's more social questions, so I don't think that counts.
I saw a Jordanian guy doing it in Jordan, and they were asking kind of taboo questions, which I love. That's my favorite kind. So
Yeah. It's like that's how you get the juicy answers.
yeah, I mean, to go ahead and ask some of the things you do, it really, I cringe inside, for you.
Yeah. Yeah, because because I know you don't always agree with the questions. Your job is to just go out and just ask the questions people send you.
Rarely. A lot of the questions I read and go, really? That? I'm going to ask that? Fine, I'll ask.
Yeah,
I don't actually, mostly because I don't believe in any religion. Anything to do with religion I think is interesting, but I don't really care. I don't, what the answer is, who cares? I mean, but I notice people really do. So I throw in a lot more religious questions because it gets me more views. That's part of it. Yeah. And it is sometimes does link to other issues that are interesting to me. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of the questions, I don't actually like the questions, but I see myself in the role of I'm there for that person. They can't travel here. They want me to ask their question for them. So I try. I mean, I don't think I actually think I'm not brave enough that I should argue with people much more often from the standpoint of the person who's asking. And sometimes I get a little bit wimpy about it, or I just don't feel like it, or it's exhausting. It's so it can be exhausting to have some argument that it depends on my mood sometimes. So, and I notice it I try to keep track of all the answers I get to see if at least in some of them I'm a little bit argumentative. I try because I think it gets more information when you're argumentative. If I challenge people, maybe they'll back down, but maybe they won't, and maybe they'll dig in. I don't know. I always want to see what they say. So sometimes when I'm editing, I always think, oh, I should have gone farther with that one. I should have pushed. But interesting.
Yeah. We're coming up on the end of our time, so if there's one more thing I want to ask you though, Corey. This one's more of a personal question. How do you personally see your Judaism? In reference to you, how did that bring you to who you are now? How did that bring you here to Israel?
Because those are two different things. Yeah. Coming here to Israel is because I married an Israeli guy, and no, that's not entirely true. I mean, it's true. I married an Israeli guy, but part of the reason was I got married, and part of the reason was this is a really interesting culture. It is not, when I came here at age 19 on an overseas program because I wanted to travel, I expected this place to be a little bit like Brooklyn or something, a bunch of Orthodox Jews and some very aggressive Ashkenazi, Jews, the way I grew up. It is very Middle Eastern from my perspective. It is the culture. There are so many different cultures. And what I liked about it is that there are really so many ways to be a Jew. So in terms of how I define my Judaism, I see it through history. I think the Jews have a very interesting story. And I like that about us. I think we have a very interesting story. Whether I believe the story, no. But it doesn't really matter. I believe that there is archaeological and historical records that point to in a certain direction, which I think is just fun to read about and know about. So, but I don't take it super seriously. Like, meaning I did that one of those 23andMe tests and found out that I'm, 99% Ashkenazi Jewish, and that my paternal line comes from this region, and my maternal line comes from somewhere in Europe. And I went, okay. I mean, if I had found out, I was entirely not Jewish, I'd say, okay, that would be interesting too. But so I just see this place as, I just take it from a curiosity perspective. So I don't believe in, my little joke I once told people years ago is, if they replaced all the Jewish holidays with Muslim holidays, for example, or Christian holidays here, I don't care. I love Christmas. Love Christmas.
Christmas is a great time. Very difficult to find a tree over here, though.
I love the Christmas lights and all that. If they replaced everything here with a completely different religion, I would just shrug my shoulders and go, all right, fine. I don't care about that part of it. I care about the history, and I care about my people. I got to say that that was a bit of brainwashing that my parents did on me, this whole idea of sending me to Jewish school and the Holocaust and the pogroms of Russia, of the fact that my people have not been safe for many, many years, which is true of a lot of peoples. It's not exactly unique to us. But so that my Judaism is a mixture of the interesting story we have, the history, and the fact that I want my people to be safe. But I project that onto the Palestinians because they're kind of living, just like lots of people around the world, a similar reality in many ways. So, I don't see it exactly the same way, but I want the same for them that I have for me.
Corey, you should definitely come to the Samaritan village again. I think definitely more people will be interested also in some more questions. And
sure.
That was a really nice place. So you're invited in it whenever you want.
Yeah, I will. I am coming post-vaccine. I'm there.
Yeah, and if you ever want some young gentlemen who will say whatever to a question, who also speak English, we're here.
Okay, so one of the things I really want to do, and this is going to get me in so much trouble, but I love it, is to have someone behind me, because it can't be me, who is saying, and it's got to be, I need somebody who's very pro-Israel with the Palestinians, somebody who's very pro-Palestinian with the Israelis, to stand behind me as I ask people the regular questions and go, are you fucking kidding me? Really, that's your answer? Like, I
can do that.
To come with me and be like, you got it. Are you people full of shit? And I want it for both sides. It's not that even stuff that I agree with, when I hear an answer I agree with, I want someone behind me challenging it from a mainstream perspective, right? I mean, I love annoying people. Like you give me a chance, I will run around telling everyone they are dumb. I will play the argumentative fool all day and night. I love that role. Yeah, I have no problem with that. Like, even things, I hear answers and I go, oh, that's really nice. That's really great. And somebody else is going to go, no, what are you, crazy? That's you no. Stupid. Think about it. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm very, I like that. I like challenge. I think people should be challenged and to think. So, and I like doing it through a lens of humor, if possible, which I know is not an easy thing. Middle Easterners not known for liking to be challenged through humor. Yeah. Well, I mean, in certain cases they can. They can, but sometimes there's certain, too many taboos, and I'm all about the elephant in the room and the taboo, and I get in a lot of trouble for that. Yeah. Well, that's part of the thing that makes your channel and videos so interesting, is that you are saying that taboo. You're asking the questions people normally wouldn't ask, and which is invaluable, I believe, for the cause of just advancing peace in this region. Just people talking to each other. And well, even if it doesn't produce peace, I have no illusions. Even if it makes people understand a little bit, not agree, just have some understanding. Good enough. That to me is fine. You don't have to agree. You don't have to like it. All you have to do is understand that people think in a different way. That's it.
Yeah. And that's sometimes enough. So in some ways.
Because it really does. It humanizes. I mean, my experience with Palestinians is it's I have a hard time with Palestinian mentality, but you know what? I've humanized them at the same time because I had no idea who they were before, 12 years ago, 10 years ago. So now it's harder for me to, it'd be harder for me to say the next war, we need to lay into them the way people talk on both sides because I know who they are, even if I don't like a lot of things, that it doesn't matter. It humanizes.
Hold on 1 second. For me.
For sure.
For sure. Oh, shit, the jacket.
Yeah, you're right, Corey. I know what you mean because I lived with them also. Totally, I can understand what you're saying. It's like
So and it's interesting to me. We'll have to figure out how to do this. But one of my favorite things was when Palestinian Muslims tell me, no, we like the Jews. We live with the Jews. Up on the hill we have Jews because they call you Jews. And I go, well, hey, they're not Jews. I mean, they can be Jews if they want to be. I'm okay with it. They're Samaritans, slightly different. And they're a small group who are under your control. So it's not exactly, because
that's true. That's true.
The Samaritans are pro-Palestinian. And I go, not exactly. And I'm not saying you're pro-Israel. I mean, I think I would guess that Samaritans get more from Israel. Have a safer existence.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we have many positives from Israel. You're completely right. And there's there's this common belief about the Israelis that they are from Poland, really, or from Russia, not really Jewish, And the Samaritans are the real ones.
Converted 100 years ago. Yes.
Exactly.
But this is a huge issue, Abood. It's something that we need to do better to debunk that because we've got 1 million people here, immigrants from all over the Arab world, and places that are close, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and I think breaking these kind of myths, the same with the Star of David and the Nile to the Euphrates and Tigris, these kind of myths.
Oh, that one.
They just cause havoc. They just wreak havoc. And I think that's one of the things that your channel is great at doing, Corey. It's like, boom, this is just complete myth. It's just complete nonsense. And I think it's something that is huge on both sides, on the Israeli side as well, thinking that Palestinians just want to wipe us out and put us in the sea. And that's like 100% of everyone over there. That's how they think. So it's about breaking down these barriers for sure.
Yeah, I mean, generalization is the bane of every society.
That's it. So you guys you're welcome to come with me. I don't know if we could go with such a large group.
Yeah, probably not.
To speakers, but yes, definitely a possibility.
Sure. Let us know once you feel safe and you've had a vaccine and stuff, and no problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm still asking. I was in Bethlehem 2 weeks ago, and so I'm still asking. It makes me a bit nervous because Palestinians are not wearing masks at all. I mean, I went into a restaurant and there's 60 and 70-year-olds just talking. Young people, and I'm like, guys, no. I mean, young people, it's fine. You guys, your age, you're all fine.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is that like we're not worried about us getting killed. We're worried about spreading it and killing those who are vulnerable.
Exactly, they go home to their families. That's what I'm worried about. It's not that young people. So, anyways, vaccines hopefully are coming. Hopefully.
Yeah. All right. So, there's one more thing I wanted to ask, but I don't know. If they asked it while I was away for a couple seconds there before we go.
What was it?
The thing that I wanted to ask was, where do you see yourself going with the Ask project? Is there an end point with this? How long do you think you're going to keep it up? How long do you think there will be interest?
No, I'll just keep doing it. I've been asked this since the beginning, and everyone says, you got to make a documentary. You got to write a book. And I'm like, no, a documentary, first of all, I hate documentaries because documentaries are telling you a story that I think you need to know. And that's not the point of these videos. The videos are about everyone telling their own little story, and then you get a slice of each society. That's the idea. And I don't want to tell that story. I have my own ideas, as I've shared with you, but I don't think the video should be that. I don't think I should be giving, well, I think there should be maybe some analysis in them, but I don't think I should be telling a story. Where should it go? Well, first of all, I'll just keep doing them because I just love doing them. I'll do them as long as I can, although I might leave Israel at a certain point because I'm tired of being poor. I'm really tired of being poor. So country sucks for that. So the other idea I had other ideas for other letting people tell the stories about what is this conflict all about in a more systematic way. I have those ideas. I even have proposals and, how to do it. But I've never found funders. So that's one idea. I had another idea that's not, I don't know if I could do, but of doing a fictional story about Israelis and Palestinians, but it would be from, starting thousands of years ago and telling like family stories up until today. And it would weave the stories of Jews and Palestinians, and most places they don't really interact. But some points they do interact, even in history they did. And that to me that's just a way to humanize the people and to keep people outside who have these very specific views of what this all is about and how they're kind of missing the point. This is a very complicated conflict. And it's not that simple to say, if we just do this, it'll be solved. It's not that simple. So those are other ideas I had, but I don't see that means a lot of money and people with influence to be able to do it. I don't see that happening. So, but in the meantime, I'm just going to do the videos because I just had a great time.
Well, Corey, thank you so much for coming. That's the reason why we kind of opened this podcast, because we want people to get the understanding from us too in some ways that they cannot get from the media. So
add our perspective, talk about the real issues that from a moderate perspective, from trying to be fair as much as we can, so that way, because like we don't want to be propaganda. And we want to fight back against that propaganda, whether it's man-made or it's just coming into a person from the situation that surrounds them.
Yeah.
But it's the very message of what we're trying to do here. But Corey, thank you for coming on. It was so great to have you. It was
pleasure.
It was really an education. And again, been a huge fan. And guys, you know what time it is? It's time for the episode. Be over.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
You guys are great. You guys are fun. This is fun. I'll check out the podcast. So wait, is this
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Corey.